The cultural impact within the organization was significant. Employees became more attentive, more engaged, and more aware of potential risks. Procedures were strengthened, communication improved, and collaboration became more central to operations. The lessons from the revelation were integrated into training, decision-making, and strategic planning, creating a more resilient, adaptable, and thoughtful organization. The safe, once a private symbol of control, now served as a shared reminder of the importance of preparation, vigilance, and ethical responsibility. He also reflected on the personal growth that emerged from the experience. The confrontation with vulnerability, the acknowledgement of blind spots, the guidance provided by her observation and preparation. It led to a deeper understanding of himself and his responsibilities. Confidence remained, but it was now balanced by humility and awareness. Trust was more carefully considered, and decisions were informed by insight and foresight rather than assumption. The experience had reshaped not just his actions, but his understanding of leadership, integrity, and the human dimensions of power. As months passed, the organization stabilized, strengthened by the lessons learned and the measures implemented. The safe continued to be present, a reminder of both past confidence and the growth that had emerged from confronting reality. Employees, clients, and partners observed the changes in approach, the increased attention to detail, and the commitment to ethical conduct. The narrative of revelation, preparation, and resilience became a defining story for the organization, illustrating how vigilance, insight, and strategic awareness can transform challenges into lasting lessons. She remained a central figure in this ongoing process. Her quiet guidance, ensuring that the principles of accountability, preparation, and ethical responsibility were consistently applied. Her role had evolved from observer to strategic partner, reinforcing the importance of careful planning, thoughtful action, and the courage to address vulnerabilities when necessary. The revelation had not only altered the perception of security, but had created a framework for ongoing growth, stability, and success. He came to understand that untouchability was not a state of being, but a perception, one that could be reinforced through preparation, awareness, and ethical conduct. The experience had shown him the limits of relying solely on confidence, physical safeguards, or appearances. True resilience required insight, diligence, and the ability to act responsibly in the face of unexpected challenges. The safe, though still formidable, now symbolized the integration of these lessons into both personal and organizational life. The story of the revelation, the safe, and the careful preparation that had led to a transformative outcome became a part of the organizational culture. Employees were encouraged to think critically, observe carefully, and consider consequences in their work. Leadership emphasized transparency, ethical conduct, and collaboration, creating an environment in which lessons from the past informed future actions. The impact of the experience extended beyond the immediate circumstances, shaping behavior, decision-making, and perception in lasting ways. He reflected on the human elements of the experience, the importance of trust, observation, ethical responsibility, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. The safe had been a powerful symbol, but it was human awareness, preparation, and integrity that ultimately defined the outcome. The revelation had changed not only his understanding of security, but his understanding of relationships, influence, and the responsibilities that come with power. It was a transformation that would endure, guiding decisions and shaping actions for years to come. In the end, the safe remained in the office, a heavy, precise object that drew attention from visitors and employees alike. Yet its significance had evolved, no longer a fortress of untouchable confidence. It now represented the integration of experience, insight, and ethical responsibility into everyday life. It was a reminder that preparation, awareness, and careful action were the true foundations of resilience, and that even those who believed themselves invincible could grow, adapt, and emerge stronger through reflection and understanding. She continued to woe. He had always believed that power and wealth were two things that could make a person untouchable. From a young age, He had worked tirelessly to build his life, taking risks that others wouldn't dare to take. He grew up in a modest home, where every dollar was counted. And the idea of failure was something whispered about but never confronted. Those early experiences had taught him one thing: security was everything. And control over it was the key to surviving in a world where everyone seemed to be trying to get ahead. As he got older, he moved into bigger ventures, starting small businesses that slowly grew into something more substantial. Each success added to his confidence, and he began to see himself as someone who could not be challenged. His office was the reflection of his mind, organized, intimidating, and precise. Yet there was one item that stood out above everything else. One symbol of his supposed invincibility: a massive steel safe that sat in the corner of the room, locked with a combination only he knew. To him, that safe wasn't just a storage space. It was a fortress, a symbol of all he had achieved, and proof that nothing could ever threaten him. People around him often whispered about the safe. Employees, business partners, and even some competitors had heard rumors about what it contained. Some said it held contracts that could make or break fortunes. Others claimed there were personal letters or even evidence of questionable deals. He would smile whenever he heard such gossip, feeling a sense of superiority. To him, it didn't matter what was inside. The fact that people believed it was untouchable gave him a thrill, a quiet power that no one else could touch in the office. He would occasionally demonstrate his control over it, opening the heavy door with a dramatic flair that never failed to impress. People would watch, some with admiration, others with subtle envy. He loved the feeling, the sense that no matter what happened outside, within those walls, he was safe. It was a fortress not just for his possessions, but for his ego. Each time he turned the combination and swung the heavy door open, he felt a surge of pride, a reaffirmation that he had outsmarted the world. But it wasn't just the safe that gave him confidence. He had built relationships carefully, choosing who could be trusted and who could not. He had a team of employees who were loyal, or at least appeared to be loyal. Everyone had their place, everyone knew their role, and he had made sure that there was no loose end that could cause trouble. Yet in his mind, there was one person whose loyalty was above all else. Someone who had been with him through thick and thin, seen him at his best and worst, and understood the world in a way he sometimes could not. That person was his assistant, the one person he trusted more than anyone else. She had started working with him when he was still small, in the early days of his business ventures. Over time, she had become indispensable. She handled appointments, correspondence, and even delicate negotiations, always with precision and discretion. She had a quiet presence, one that didn't demand attention but seemed to notice everything. He appreciated her efficiency, but he also relied on her in ways he didn't always acknowledge. In his eyes, she was part of the machinery that kept him untouchable, a silent partner who made the chaos of his world manageable. Despite her competence, he often underestimated her understanding of his world. He assumed that her loyalty was blind, that she would never question his decisions or challenge his authority. This assumption gave him a sense of comfort, a belief that no one within his inner circle could ever pose a threat. He thought that as long as the safe remained locked and the right people remained in place, nothing could disrupt the life he had built so carefully. Outside the office, his life was equally controlled. He had a routine that allowed him to manage stress and maintain his image. Meetings were scheduled to the minute, and even social interactions were carefully curated. He had a reputation for precision and success, and people admired him for it. Invitations to exclusive events, dinners with influential figures, and recognition in local business circles reinforced the idea that he had arrived at a place where very few could follow. To him, these were not just accolades, they were proof of his untouchable status. Yet, even in his carefully constructed world, there were small cracks. Late nights in the office, moments when he doubted the loyalty of even his closest allies, and the occasional financial hiccup reminded him that the world was unpredictable. Still, he dismissed these as minor inconveniences. Convinced that his safe and the people around him provided enough protection to withstand any storm, he had survived challenges before, and he believed that survival was a skill he had mastered better than anyone else. The safe, in many ways, became more than just a physical object. It was a mental shield, a talisman that reminded him of the power he had earned. When he looked at it, he felt a sense of calm that he could not find anywhere else. It was his reminder that, no matter the chaos outside, he had built something enduring, something that could not easily be taken away. He believed that others envied this security, that they saw the safe as a symbol of his invincibility, and that belief fed his sense of superiority. People would sometimes attempt to challenge him, test the limits of his influence, or question his decisions. He met these challenges with confidence, using the safe as a quiet reminder that he had control over the unknown. The mere presence of the heavy steel door seemed to command respect and caution. He believed that the safe communicated a message, that some things were off limits, that certain boundaries could not be crossed, and that he alone determined what was permissible in his world. At home, the pattern continued. He maintained the same careful control over his personal life, keeping his family and private affairs neatly compartmentalized. He shared only what he wanted others to know, believing that secrecy was a form of protection. The lessons of his early life, where vulnerability often led to disadvantagers, remained deeply ingrained. Trust was earned sparingly. Confidence in others was reserved for those who had proven themselves over time. His evenings were often spent reviewing documents, planning the next steps for his ventures, and double-checking that everything was secure. The safe was always at the back of his mind, a constant reassurance that the foundation of his life was solid. While others might see it as an overreaction, he considered it wisdom, safeguard against the unpredictability of the world. Even his friends and social acquaintances were aware of the safe. They teased him occasionally, calling him obsessed with security. But he dismissed it lightly, confident that his caution would protect him from harm. To him, every precaution was justified, every layer of protection necessary. He believed that the careful construction of his life, combined with the literal and figurative safeguards he had put in place, meant that he had created a life that was impervious to the misfortunes that struck others. Yet, beneath the confidence, there was a quiet tension, one that he rarely acknowledged. Sometimes late at night, he wondered if he had missed something, some detail that could undermine everything he had built. These thoughts were fleeting and usually dismissed quickly. He prided himself on his ability to anticipate challenges, to stay several steps ahead of anyone who might wish him harm. Still, the safe remained a constant, a reassuring presence that reminded him that he had considered every angle, that he had prepared for the worst while expecting the best. Employees admired him for his success and efficiency, but also sensed the intensity that underpinned his confidence. He was demanding, exacting, and sometimes intimidating. Yet those who worked closely with him understood that his approach came from a desire to protect what he had built. He believed that in a world full of uncertainty, only those who were vigilant could truly thrive. The assistant, more than anyone, saw the meticulous care he put into his life and work. She observed the way he handled challenges, how he celebrated victories, and how he reacted to setbacks. She noticed the pride he took in his achievements and the almost obsessive attention he paid to the safe. She understood the layers of control he maintained and the deep-seated belief that he was untouchable. But she also noticed something else: the cracks in his armor, the moments when confidence bordered on arrogance, and the blind spots that he failed to see. As the days went on, the pattern continued. He would arrive at the office, unlock the safe, and feel that familiar surge of control. Employees would move efficiently around him, meetings would proceed on schedule, and his ventures would expand, seemingly without obstacle. The world outside might be unpredictable, but within the walls of his office and under the shadow of the safe, he was the master of his domain. Unbeknownst to him, however, the stage was being set for a moment that would test everything he believed about security, trust, and invincibility. The safe, which had always symbolized protection, was about to reveal a truth he had never anticipated. The very person he considered loyal and unwavering, his assistant, would become the catalyst for a revelation that could change everything. But for now, he remained confident, focused on his control, and convinced that the foundation of his life was unshakable. The safe stood as a silent guardian, a sentinel of his perceived untouchable status, and aware that the world outside had begun to stir in ways he could not foresee. Over the years, she had grown used to his routines, his habits, and his obsession with control. She watched closely as he managed his empire, observing how carefully he handled every detail. While he believed the safe was his ultimate shield, she had quietly realized that it contained more than money or contracts. It held power, influence, and secrets that could alter the lives of many people, not just him. And she understood something he did not. The perception of untouchability could be far more fragile than he imagined. Her days were filled with the rhythm of the office. She arrived early, often before he did, ensuring that everything was in order. She managed his schedule, filed documents, and handled correspondence with the precision that only years of experience could bring. But alongside the tasks everyone could see, she performed another role, one that required patience, observation, and careful planning. She took note of the patterns in his decisions, the moments when his confidence became arrogance, and the tiny cracks that even he overlooked. These were the pieces of a puzzle that she quietly assembled, never revealing her full understanding, yet always preparing for the day when knowledge would matter most. It was not that she wanted to undermine him. She respected the journey he had taken, the struggles he had faced, and the empire he had built. She had witnessed his determination, his cleverness, and his ability to bounce back from situations that would have destroyed others. But over time, she began to see the consequences of unchecked pride and blind trust. The safe, once a symbol of his security, was in her eyes a ticking reminder that reliance on a single point of protection could be dangerous. The very thing he trusted most might also be the thing that left him exposed. She spent hours reviewing records, understanding transactions, and noting inconsistencies. There were small signs that others might have missed, patterns in documents, odd financial movements, and discrepancies that hinted at mistakes. She did not confront him about these immediately, understanding that timing and preparation were key. He was confident, nearly invincible in his own mind, and any hint of doubt could be met with anger or dismissal. So she continued quietly, gathering information, building a mental map of the risks and vulnerabilities, and preparing herself for the moment when her knowledge would become critical. In meetings, she observed interactions with clients and business partners. He often flaunted his confidence, his control over the room, and his ability to sway decisions. While others were dazzled by his charisma, she noticed subtle tells that indicated tension, hesitation, or fear in those around him. These observations added depth to her understanding, revealing how much influence the safe and the perception of untouchability truly held. It was a shield not only for tangible assets, but for the respect, fear, and admiration he commanded. Yet she saw that even this shield was not impenetrable. Sometimes she found herself reflecting on her own role. She had choices to make, paths to consider. Loyalty was complex. It was not simply blind obedience, but an understanding of responsibility and ethics. She questioned how far she should go, what her duties truly were, and whether the knowledge she had accumulated should remain hidden. These reflections were not taken lightly. She weighed each action against potential consequences, considering not only her position, but the impact on the people affected by his decisions and the empire he had built. She also recognized the human side of him, the man behind the confident exterior. She knew moments of doubt, nights of worry, and the fear of failure that even someone as seemingly untouchable could not escape. These glimpses reminded her that power was not absolute, that even the strongest armor could have weaknesses. Yet he rarely showed these vulnerabilities publicly, maintaining the image that had earned him respect and fear. She understood this duality well, seeing both the strength and the fragility in the same person. Her own preparation became a silent routine. She created backups of documents, took mental notes of conversations, and cataloged details that might seem trivial but could be significant in context. She practiced patience, knowing that timing would be crucial. Any misstep could alert him to her awareness, undermining the delicate balance she maintained. It was a quiet form of power, one that required discipline and foresight, one that she had mastered without drawing attention. Meanwhile, he continued to act with the confidence of someone untouchable. The safe remained a constant presence, the symbol of his security. He would often boast in meetings, speaking of contracts and assets that no one could challenge. His voice carried authority, and his demeanor reinforced the image he had cultivated over years of careful work. Yet he remained unaware of the quiet accumulation of knowledge around him, of the subtle ways in which someone close was preparing for a revelation that could shift the balance of control, interactions with employees and business. Associates often reinforced his belief in invulnerability. They admired him, followed his instructions, and avoided challenging his authority. He interpreted this as proof that his position was unassailable, that the empire he had built was secure. Yet, she saw the layers beneath the surface, the quiet uncertainty in some, the hesitation in others, and the potential for disruption if the wrong person decided to act. These insights strengthened her resolve to be cautious and precise in her own actions. She began to understand the psychological aspects of control and perception. The safe, while physically formidable, also represented the belief in invincibility that he carried. His confidence was reinforced by the fear or respect others showed, creating a feedback loop that bolstered his sense of untouchability. Yet she recognized that this perception was delicate. A single revelation, strategically presented, could dismantle the illusion entirely. She considered how such a moment might unfold, weighing the impact and the ethical considerations of revealing what she knew. Every day added to her understanding. Meetings, emails, phone calls, and casual conversations became sources of insight. She learned patterns, discovered weaknesses, and identified potential consequences of various decisions. The empire he built was impressive, but it was also complex and interdependent, and she recognized that even minor errors could cascade into significant problems. Her awareness of these vulnerabilities became a silent form of protection, not only for herself but for those who might be affected if issues were left unchecked. She also observed how he handled stress and conflict. Under pressure, he relied on routine, logic, and the perceived security of his safe. He had strategies for negotiation, for deflecting criticism, and for maintaining control in difficult situations. Yet she noticed moments when his judgment was clouded by pride, moments when confidence crossed into arrogance, and moments when reliance on a single point of security left him exposed. These observations were critical. Forming the foundation for the careful planning she maintained, her role required emotional intelligence as much as technical knowledge. She had to manage relationships delicately, ensuring that her observations and actions did not raise suspicion. The balance between loyalty and responsibility was delicate, and she navigated it with skill. She understood that timing, discretion, and strategy were as important as the facts she gathered. Any misstep could undermine her position and compromise the impact of the eventual revelation as the months and years passed. She had developed a mental map of vulnerabilities, risks, and dependencies that even he might not fully grasp. The safe, once the symbol of his ultimate security, was now also a symbol of potential exposure. While he saw it as untouchable, she understood the nuances, the layers of information it contained, and the ways in which it could change the course of events if used strategically. Her awareness was a quiet force, one that could alter outcomes without direct confrontation. She also reflected on the human side of power. She recognized that control, influence, and security were complex and often interwoven with ethical considerations. Loyalty, trust, and responsibility were not simply given, they were earned and maintained through careful judgment and integrity. She weighed these factors constantly, understanding that her actions could have far-reaching consequences, both for herself and for those around her. Her observations extended beyond the office. Social events, client meetings, and public interactions offered insights into how he was perceived and how his authority was reinforced. She noted reactions, measured responses, and identified moments when perception could be challenged or reinforced. Each detail added to her understanding, shaping the strategy she maintained quietly. Without drawing attention or provoking suspicion, the safe remained at the center of it all. a physical and symbolic reminder of the power and control he believed he held. Yet she saw beyond the surface, understanding that even the strongest structures have weaknesses. She prepared for the moment when those weaknesses would matter, for the moment when knowledge and careful planning could alter the narrative entirely. Her patience and discretion were as important as the facts she gathered, creating a foundation for action that would have significant impact in quiet moments. She reflected on her own role and the potential consequences of revealing what she knew. Loyalty was complex, and responsibility was nuanced. She understood that her knowledge was powerful, that timing and strategy were critical, and that ethical considerations could not be ignored. She prepared herself mentally, emotionally, and strategically for the eventual moment when her understanding would become pivotal. Meanwhile, he continued his routines, confident and oblivious to the subtle forces at play. The safe, the symbol of untouchability, remained locked and formidable. His confidence reinforced his control over those around him, and his reputation for security and success grew. Yet the very confidence that made him seem invincible also created blind spots that she had observed carefully and cataloged for the day. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but the rhythm of the office remained the same. He continued to move through his life with the confidence of someone who believed nothing could touch him. Every morning, he arrived early, unlocking the safe with the same precise movements that had become a ritual over the years. Each time the heavy door swung open, he felt a surge of control, a reassurance that he was prepared for any challenge. Employees moved around him with careful efficiency. Clients were impressed with his poise, and colleagues admired his apparent invincibility. Yet in the quiet corners of the office, she was watching, noting every detail. Understanding the vulnerabilities he refused to acknowledge, there was a calm in the routine. But beneath it, tension lingered. She had been observing the subtle shifts in his empire for months now, recognizing patterns that others missed. Transactions that seemed normal on the surface sometimes contained inconsistencies. Business partners who outwardly praised him occasionally left hints of dissatisfaction. Even small mistakes in documentation, overlooked by his keen eye, were quietly accumulating. She cataloged everything in her mind, carefully mapping each piece of the puzzle. Knowing that the day would come when this knowledge could not remain hidden, he continued to interact with people with his characteristic confidence. In meetings, he would negotiate deals with skill and precision, relying on his reputation and the influence of the safe to maintain authority. People around him admired his sharp mind and steady demeanor, but she noticed the small moments that betrayed cracks in his armor. A hesitation before a response, a subtle frown at an unexpected question, or a sigh. When a deal became complicated, these were all signs that his untouchable image was not as solid as he believed. She paid attention to each one, quietly storing them away for the future. Sometimes she reflected on her own position. Being close to him meant access to information few others had, but it also required discretion. She could not act impulsively, could not reveal what she knew without careful consideration. The balance between loyalty and responsibility weighed heavily on her. But she understood that preparation, patience, and timing were essential. Any misstep could alert him, undermine her influence, or even damage the people who might be affected by the revelation. She held in mind. He remained unaware of the depth of her awareness. To him, she was loyal, efficient, and trustworthy. He assumed her knowledge was limited to administrative tasks and daily routines, never suspecting that she had a comprehensive understanding of his empire, the risks and the vulnerabilities hidden within the safe. This overconfidence made him predictable, and predictability was something she could observe and plan around. Every action he took, every decision he made, became a data point for her, a piece of a larger strategy that she held silently. Life outside the office continued with the same careful control he demanded. Social gatherings, business lunches, and public appearances were all meticulously planned. He believed that his image was flawless, that the world saw him as untouchable, and that his confidence was justified. Yet she noticed moments when stress touched him, even if only for a second. A phone call that took longer than expected, a conversation with a client that ended abruptly. or a subtle reaction to unexpected news. These moments told her that even someone who appeared invincible could feel pressure. She observed these carefully, understanding that they were small openings in the carefully constructed shield of his life. She also paid attention to the emotional atmosphere in the office. Employees who were outwardly compliant sometimes whispered among themselves, expressing doubts or frustrations. While he interpreted these whispers as trivial, she recognized the signs of tension, the potential for disruption, and the need to remain vigilant. She understood that loyalty and compliance were not always absolute, that subtle cracks in perception could grow into significant challenges if exploited carefully. Her awareness of these dynamics added another layer to her preparation, allowing her to anticipate and plan for outcomes that he could not see as the months progressed. She began to take small, careful actions to protect herself and those around her. Copies of critical documents were made discreetly. Records were reviewed and cross-checked, and inconsistencies were documented for future reference. Each step was deliberate, taken with the understanding that one misstep could have serious consequences. She moved quietly, blending into the routine of the office, while maintaining a mental ledger of vulnerabilities, risks, and opportunities. Her preparation was invisible, yet it grew steadily, a silent force waiting for the right moment. Meanwhile, he continued to rely on the safe as the ultimate symbol of security. Every time he opened it, he felt reassured, believing that the contents were his shield against the unpredictability of the world. The door was heavy, the lock precise, and the mechanism complex. To him, this was more than a physical barrier. It was a symbol of control, testament to the years of careful work and calculated decisions that had brought him to this point. He rarely considered that the perception of security could be just as important as the actual contents of the safe, or that someone close to him might hold the key to unraveling his confidence. He also continued to mentor and guide employees with a firm but fair approach. His experience, knowledge, and strategic thinking made him respected and in some cases feared. He offered advice, made decisions quickly, and often projected an aura of infallibility. Yet she noticed the subtle moments where decisions were influenced more by instinct than analysis. Moments where pride clouded judgment, and moments where the safe could not protect against mistakes or oversights. These observations were carefully noted, forming a mental record that would inform her actions when the time came. In her private reflections, she considered the moral and ethical dimensions of her position. Loyalty was not simple obedience, and responsibility was not blind compliance. She understood that revealing what she knew would have consequences, not only for him, but for everyone connected to the empire he had built. Each decision required careful thought, weighing potential outcomes and the timing of actions. She balanced patience with urgency, discretion with necessity, and knowledge with responsibility. Understanding that the impact of a revelation could be profound, she also observed his personal life with the same careful attention. Interactions with family, friends, and associates revealed patterns that complemented her understanding of the office dynamics. Subtle behaviors, changes in routine, and reactions to unexpected situations offered insights into his character and vulnerabilities. She recognized that power and confidence could be accompanied by blind spots, that perception often masked reality, and that careful observation could uncover truths that were otherwise hidden. The office environment itself offered lessons. Meetings, presentations, and casual interactions were rich sources of information. She observed how he handled praise, criticism, and unexpected questions. She noticed the strategies he used to maintain authority and the subtle ways he projected invincibility. These details were recorded in her mind, forming a detailed picture of both the man and the empire he had built. Each observation added to her understanding, strengthening the foundation for the eventual moment when revelation would matter most. She continued to cultivate patience, understanding that timing was critical. Any premature action could disrupt the balance she maintained, alerting him to her awareness or compromising the impact of the knowledge she held. She refined her strategy, considering multiple scenarios and potential outcomes. Every conversation, every decision, and every movement in the office was noted, analyzed, and mentally cataloged. Her preparation was meticulous, invisible, and precise, a quiet power growing steadily under the surface. Meanwhile, he remained focused on his routines, confident in his perception of security. The safe continued to be a symbol of control, a physical reminder of years of careful work, and a mental shield against uncertainty. He believed that the combination of the safe, loyal employees and his own judgment made him untouchable. Yet the very confidence that reinforced his control also created blind spots, subtle vulnerabilities that she had observed and cataloged with care. She also began to understand the psychological dynamics of influence and perception. The safe was more than a physical object. It represented the belief in invincibility, the authority he projected, and the respect he commanded. She recognized that the perception of power could be as fragile as it was strong, and that a carefully timed revelation could dismantle it entirely. Her observations of behavior, patterns, and interactions allowed her to anticipate outcomes, plan responses, and prepare for the pivotal moment. When knowledge would shift the balance of control, her understanding of the empire extended beyond the surface. Financial transactions, business deals, and operational decisions were all pieces of a larger puzzle. She noticed discrepancies, inconsistencies, and subtle warning signs that indicated areas of potential vulnerability. These insights were not just academic, they were practical, forming the foundation for strategic decisions she might need to make in the future. She understood that the safe, while formidable, was not infallible, and that awareness, preparation, careful action could reveal truths he had never considered. The rhythm of the office continued. Blending routine with quiet observation, he remained confident, believing that control and perception made him untouchable. She remained vigilant, understanding that preparation, patience, and discretion were essential. The balance between visible authority and hidden knowledge created a dynamic tension, one that would eventually culminate in a revelation capable of changing everything. Her careful planning, silent observation, and strategic awareness were all building toward that moment, ensuring that when it arrived, it would have maximum impact. The days passed, and life continued. Either day began like any other. With him arriving at the office early, unlocking the safe with practiced confidence, and moving through his routine as though nothing could ever threaten his position. The air was calm, the office buzzing with quiet efficiency, and yet there was an undercurrent of tension that only she seemed to notice. She had been preparing for this day for months, every detail carefully considered, every step measured. Today, the invisible groundwork she had laid would finally intersect with the reality of his overconfidence. He continued with his usual meetings, smiling, speaking with authority, and making decisions that seemed effortless. He referred to the safe occasionally, not as an object but as a symbol of control and security, reinforcing the illusion of untouchability, not just for himself, but for everyone around him. Employees admired him, clients were reassured, and colleagues deferred to his expertise. Yet she watched everything closely, noting every reaction, every subtle indication that his empire, impressive as it was, contained hidden vulnerabilities. By mid-morning, she had quietly gathered the evidence she needed. Copies of documents, emails, and financial records had been meticulously organized, verified, and cross-checked. The discrepancies and vulnerabilities she had observed over months now formed a coherent story, one that could not be ignored. She understood the gravity of what she held in her hands. This was not just a collection of facts. It was a revelation that could alter the balance of power, exposing the fragility behind his confidence and the limitations of his perceived invincibility. She waited patiently, knowing that timing was everything. He continued to operate under the assumption that nothing could touch him, moving confidently between meetings and tasks, unaware that the foundation of his control was about to be challenged. Her calm demeanor masked the intensity of the moment. She had rehearsed this in her mind countless times, anticipating his reactions, considering every possible outcome, and preparing herself for the emotional and practical complexities of the confrontation ahead. Finally, the moment arrived. She approached him quietly, placing the folder of documents on his desk with a sense of purpose that was impossible to ignore. He glanced at it casually, assuming it was routine paperwork, but there was a subtle difference in her posture, confidence in her eyes that made him pause. "What is this?" he asked, curiosity mingled with an undercurrent of unease. She remained calm, letting the weight of the folder speak for itself. Understanding that the documents would convey more than words ever could, he began to sift through the papers, initially scanning them quickly, his confidence unshaken. But as he read further, his expression changed. Lines of worry formed across his forehead. A subtle tension replaced the ease in his posture, and his fingers hesitated over the next page. The documents detailed inconsistencies, questionable transactions, and evidence that directly contradicted the security he had so heavily relied upon. Every carefully constructed assumption he had made about the untouchability of his empire was now being challenged, and the realization hit him with increasing clarity. She watched closely, noting every subtle reaction. His breathing grew slightly heavier, his eyes darted from document to document, and a shadow of panic crossed his usually confident face. The safe, which had always been a symbol of control, now seemed almost irrelevant. Its heavy door and precise lock could not protect against the truth laid out before him. The very thing he had believed made him invincible was powerless in the face of careful preparation, meticulous observation, and undeniable evidence. The room felt different now. The hum of activity continued, but the tension between them was palpable. He looked up at her, searching for explanation, for reassurance, for a way to dismiss the contents as some mistake. But she remained composed, her calm presence a stark contrast to the turmoil he felt internally. Her silence carried its own weight, a reminder that she had not acted impulsively, that every step had been considered, and that the revelation was deliberate, precise, and inescapable. He tried to rationalize what he was seeing, to find some explanation that would restore his sense of control. He flipped through the documents again, checking dates, amounts, and signatures, hoping to find an error, a misunderstanding, anything that would allow him to maintain the illusion of security. But each page reinforced the same truth. His assumptions about the untouchability of his empire had been flawed. The evidence was clear, organized, and undeniable. The safe, once the cornerstone of his confidence, could not shield him from the consequences. A long silence followed, filled only by the quiet shuffling of papers and the distant sounds of the office. He finally spoke, his voice low and measured, attempting to regain composure. "How did this happen?" he asked, not accusing her, but questioning the reality he had believed in for so long. She responded simply, calmly, explaining that the information had been gathered through careful observation, attention to detail, and months of preparation. Her words were measured, factual, and devoid of accusation, allowing the evidence itself to speak with maximum impact. As he absorbed the information, the weight of reality settled in. The safe, the symbol of his invincibility, now seemed like a relic, a representation of misplaced confidence rather than true security. He realized that the world he had carefully constructed, the routines he relied upon, and the assumptions he had made about loyalty and control were all vulnerable to unseen forces and hidden truths. The revelation was not just about the documents. It was about his perception of power, trust, and security. Everything he believed about his untouchability was being challenged, and he had no choice but to confront it. She continued to observe him, noting how he processed the information, how his initial shock evolved into a more complex understanding. He began to consider the consequences, the potential fallout, the steps needed to address the vulnerabilities that had been exposed. His mind raced, not with fear alone, but with the realization that careful preparation, awareness, and diligence were as important as confidence and control. The moment was transformative, not just for him, but for their dynamic. Shifting the balance of understanding and influence in the room, he finally set the documents down, taking a deep breath, and looked at her with a mixture of respect, acknowledgement, and a hint of vulnerability he rarely displayed. The safe, once a fortress of confidence, no longer held the same power. The revelation she had brought to light had changed the rules, challenging assumptions and redefining what security truly meant. He understood in that moment that trust, preparation, and careful observation were forces that could not be ignored, and that even the most confident exterior could be vulnerable to unseen truths. The office continued its rhythm around them. Oblivious to the seismic shift that had occurred, employees went about their tasks, clients arrived for scheduled meetings, and business continued as usual. Yet within the room, the dynamic had changed irrevocably. The safe, once the ultimate symbol of security, was now a reminder of the limits of confidence and the power of awareness. The revelation had shifted not just the understanding of his empire, but the understanding of what it meant to be untouchable, challenging long-held assumptions and forcing a confrontation with reality that could not be ignored. He began to ask questions, seeking clarity on details, origins, and implications. She answered with precision, providing context, verification, and a roadmap for understanding the full scope of the situation. Her calm demeanor, combined with the undeniable evidence, created a framework for action, allowing him to begin processing not just the facts but the lessons inherent in the revelation. The moment was both challenging and instructive, forcing a revaluation of priorities, strategies, and assumptions. As the day progressed, he took steps to address immediate vulnerabilities, reviewing decisions, adjusting strategies, and considering the broader consequences of the exposure. The safe, once central to his sense of control, had become almost symbolic, a reminder that true security required awareness, preparation, and the ability to confront uncomfortable truths. She remained present, guiding, observing, and providing measured support. Her role shifting from silent observer to strategic partner in navigating the consequences. The emotional impact was profound. Confidence had given way to reflection. Certainty had shifted to cautious understanding. And the perception of untouchability had been tempered by the reality of vulnerability. The revelation was not just about documents or transactions. It was about trust, responsibility, and the need for continuous awareness. The safe, for all its physical strength, could not substitute for insight, diligence, or preparation. By evening, he had begun to internalize the lessons of the day. Conversations with colleagues, reflections on past decisions, and consideration of future actions were all influenced by the understanding that security and power were not absolute. The revelation had altered his perspective, reshaped his priorities, and introduced a sense of humility into a character that had long relied on confidence alone. She had demonstrated, through careful observation and strategic timing, that even someone who believed themselves untouchable could be challenged, and that preparation, patience, and awareness were forces that could change outcomes. The safe remained in the corner of the office, heavy, precise, and formidable, yet its significance had shifted. No longer a symbol of untouchable power, it was now a reminder that confidence without awareness could be fragile, and that the perception of invincibility could be altered by careful preparation and the courage to reveal truth. The day had transformed the dynamic between them, redefining roles, influence, and understanding in ways that would have lasting impact. As he finally left the office, he carried with him the knowledge that the foundation of his life and empire had been tested, challenged, and illuminated in ways he had never anticipated. The safe, the symbol the days following the revelation, were filled with quiet reflection and careful decisions. He returned to the office each morning with a different perspective, no longer carrying the same confidence that had defined him for years. The safe, once a symbol of invincibility, sat in its usual corner, heavy and formidable, yet its significance had shifted. It now represented lessons learned, vulnerabilities acknowledged, and the need for vigilance beyond simple physical security. He understood that trust, preparation, and awareness were more important than any barrier of steel. She continued her work with the same calm, composed demeanor that had characterized her actions from the start. Her role had changed subtly. She was no longer just an observer, but a guide through the complex aftermath of the revelation. She helped him navigate decisions, reconsider strategies, and address vulnerabilities that had been exposed. Each interaction was measured, deliberate, and focused on rebuilding stability while reinforcing the importance of integrity, vigilance, and careful planning. Her influence, once hidden, became an essential part of how he moved forward. The office itself felt different. Employees sensed the subtle shift in atmosphere, the new tone of reflection and awareness that permeated the space. Meetings were conducted with greater attention to detail. Decisions were considered more carefully, and the culture of careful preparation began to take root. He engaged more actively with his team, listening closely, asking questions, and acknowledging insights that he might have previously dismissed. This openness, though born of necessity, strengthened relationships and fostered a more resilient approach to challenges. Clients and partners began to notice changes as well. His interactions became more thoughtful, his strategies more nuanced, and his responses to unexpected situations more measured. While the underlying confidence remained, it was tempered by an awareness of risk and a recognition of the importance of thorough preparation. The revelation had reshaped not just his perception of security, but his understanding of leadership, trust, and responsibility. It was a transformation that extended beyond the immediate circumstances, influencing decisions and actions across every aspect of his life and empire. He also took time for personal reflection. The realization that his assumptions about untouchability had been flawed prompted deep consideration of his own behavior, choices, and priorities. He recognized the value of humility, the importance of listening, and the necessity of relying on more than a single point of security. The safe, while still a powerful object, was no longer the cornerstone of confidence it had once been. True security, he now understood, came from awareness, preparation, and the ability to act responsibly when faced with challenges. She continued to provide guidance, ensuring that he addressed vulnerabilities thoroughly and ethically. Together, they reviewed procedures, clarified responsibilities, and implemented measures that strengthened the organization while maintaining integrity. Her observations, careful documentation, and strategic awareness became central to the process, highlighting the importance of collaboration, trust, and accountability. The experience reinforced the lessons that had been revealed and created a framework for more resilient decision-making in the future. The impact extended beyond the office walls. Family, friends, and associates noticed changes in how he approached situations, engaged with people, and considered consequences. He was more thoughtful, more deliberate, and more aware of the potential implications of his actions. The safe, once a symbol of untouchability, had been transformed into a reminder of the importance of preparation, awareness, and the careful balancing of confidence with humility. The revelation had created a shift, not only in his perspective, but in the culture of those around him. Financial matters and business operations were carefully reviewed. Discrepancies, inconsistencies, and potential risks were addressed proactively. Demonstrating a commitment to accountability and ethical conduct, employees were engaged in the process, encouraged to provide insights, and included in the creation of more robust systems. This approach not only reinforced stability but also fostered a culture of collaboration and vigilance, ensuring that lessons learned from the revelation were integrated into ongoing operations and future decision-making. The safe, once the focal point of confidence, became a symbol of reflection. It reminded him and those around him that appearances of security could be deceptive, and that true resilience came from awareness, preparation, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. It was no longer a fortress that guaranteed safety, but a lesson in the importance of combining physical safeguards with thoughtful oversight, ethical judgment, and strategic planning. Its presence reinforced the understanding that power and security are most effective when grounded in responsibility and insight. She continued to monitor developments with the same careful attention that had guided her throughout the process. Her role, while less visible to others, remained essential. She ensured that procedures were followed, risks were managed, and decisions were informed by a comprehensive understanding of both the immediate circumstances and the broader context. Her influence, though subtle, helped shape a more resilient organization and reinforce the lessons of preparation. vigilance, and ethical responsibility. Over time, he began to share the story of the revelation with a select few, using it as a teaching moment for employees, partners, and associates. The experience became a powerful example of the importance of awareness, preparation, and accountability. It illustrated how confidence alone, without careful observation and ethical conduct, could be fragile. The safe, once a symbol of invulnerability, became a story that emphasized the value of insight, diligence, and responsible action.